G'day and welcome to another video from my channel, Mike's Chess Videos. If you've been watching this channel, you know I've been uploading a lot of videos from Irving Chernev and Fred Reinfeld's book, Winning Chess, which is a book all about chess tactics and also about how to think about positions so that you can see the tactics and come up with these winning ideas. Now that's an ongoing series, but it is coming to its close, and I just thought I would give a brief announcement about my intentions for this channel moving forward. To summarize, one of my own goals with chess being just a hobby of mine rather than a central focus in my life, is of course to improve, and I have certain end goals that I would like to achieve. One of them that I'm aiming for is to win the local championship in my area, which is the Canberra Chess Club Championship. I'd like to win that this year. Now, if you've been watching this channel from last year, you'll know that last year I was just a half a point away from winning that competition. And it was unfortunate because there was a couple of rounds where I was unable to play due to work commitments. And it's very possible that I'll miss even more rounds this year round because of my work commitments. And so I have a secondary goal, just in case I can't actually compete properly in that tournament, that the secondary goal is to try and reach an online chess rating of 2000 on chess.com. Now, at the moment, I'm about to play a game, as you'll see, and my current rating is about 1700, although my peak rating on chess.com is really closer to 1850. Now, as part of my preparation for these goals, the ways I'm trying to improve, there's going to be a few main things I do. One of them is tactics training, and I will post videos of my tactical training sessions. Whether these are of much use to others, I'm not so sure. They may well be. There'll be a discipline about it, so at least having new videos coming up, clicking through and watching these tactical videos may be of use. Regardless, that'll be one of my methods of trying to improve. The other will be through analysis of games, high-level games. And I haven't chosen which games those will be. Some of them may come from Irving Chernev's Logical Chess book or others of his books. You can see some of them behind me. Some of them may come from lessons that I have, which is another way I'm improving. I actually am fortunate enough to get chess lessons from a very strong Australian grandmaster, and he's kindly agreed to share some of his wisdom on this channel as well. So look forward and keep yourselves, tuned for more announcements about that. And the final thing is training games. I'm going to be trying to do training games, and the sort of timetable I'm thinking is 2 training games a week, 2 tactics sessions a week, and 1 game analysis per week. And that's going to be the foundation. Now, beyond that, hopefully I'll have time for more, but that's going to be sort of the minimum that I'll try to do. Now, without any further ado, let's get into it. Today, I'm going to do a training game. And so here we go. Let's play. You can see my rating at the moment is about just a smidge over 1700. And let's see if we can move it up towards the 2000 mark. All right, now I'm going to start with e4, which is very standard for me. I like e4 openings. I played them a lot. I may branch out to d4 openings or other openings in future. But for the moment, I'm sticking to e4, and against the Sicilian, I'm playing the Alapin setup. That's following along from Daniel Naroditsky, who is one of the people I've learned a lot from on YouTube. So if you haven't looked at Daniel Naroditsky and you're wanting to improve your chess, I highly recommend that you do so. Look him up. Now, this move, g6, is not a commonly played move against the Alapin, as far as I'm aware. It does just give me a chance to strike into the center, and I'm going to do that without too much thought, because I'm being guided by chess principles that owning and controlling the center with your pawns, if you have a chance to do so, tends to be a pretty good idea. And now I have these 2 pawns in the center. My bishops and my knights and my queen all have easy potential to develop. This can't really be bad for me. Now, one of the moves that I'm going to consider here is to actually take a break from my development in order to shut down this diagonal that he's finding his bishop on. Now, I don't want to play that move, but I just want to indicate that it's a possibility. The other thing I like about the move is that it controls the f6 square, which would otherwise be a natural developing square for his knight. So it's for both of those reasons that e5 certainly comes to mind. But what I'm going to do now is just take some time to myself and have a bit more of a think, because if I were to play e5, I would be, considering that he might respond with perhaps f6, trying to chip away at my pawn center. And if I do nothing about it, then he's threatening to take twice. So I would need to defend this pawn. Probably the most natural way to do it would be with knight f3. But even then, if he takes and I take back, I guess I have this pawn sitting in a pretty nice position. And if he ever tries to play, d6, I can take that, get rid of my pawn. He'll end up with isolated pawns, sort of a ruinous pawn structure around his king. So again, I think this e5 move is relatively tempting. Also possible, he could maybe give up the bishop for 2 pawns by first taking 1 pawn, and after the recapture he plays something like check. And after I block the check, he can take this pawn as well. So he gets, in that scenario here, to have a check here, I would have to block the check and then he'd come and take this pawn. So I think if I play at e5 and he takes, I take back and he goes check, I'm better off blocking with the knight. Then after he takes here with check, well, I can basically take my choice. I can offer a queen trade. I can just block with the bishop or the other bishop, and I'll be up in terms of material. And I think that really just benefits me. Up in terms of material, up in terms of development, and his queen would be out in no man's land. So I'm not afraid of that. I think we've established I'm not afraid of f6 because I just go with knight f3. And I feel like I've put a bit of a thorn in his side. What about d6? And I do know I'm taking a lot of time here, but this is the way I play. I think I play pretty well. The downside is, of course, I play slowly. Now, if d6 is played, I should suppose I could still play this knight f3 idea. And if he takes, I can take back. And once again, I feel like my pawn being on e5 hampers his development. It makes it difficult for him to move these pawns without ultimately ruining his own pawn structure. And it doesn't hamper my development. And I don't really see why I shouldn't play it. So I'm going to play e5 after all. I'm going to play e5 after all, and we'll see how he's going to respond. Now, there may be many other options for me. For example, after either f6 or d6, it's possible I could just play something like f4 and support the pawn that way. I mean, knight f3 also should be good. But I suppose we'll just have to see how things progress. In broad terms, one of the sort of meta strategies that I want to try to employ here is just to not make any very large and obvious mistakes myself. And I'll come back to that thought shortly, but let's continue playing for now. He's played the d6 move. So my initially intended move here was, in fact, knight f3. It is possible then he can pin my knight, thereby taking away one of the defenders from the e5 square. That might be another reason to prefer f4, but we have to calculate what happens. So let's say after f4 he initiates a trade here. Now, if I trade with the D pawn, it lets him take my queen. I have to move my king, which means I can't castle anymore, and that might be well okay. But I think it's probably not what I really want to do as white. I probably want to keep the queens on the board, maintain initiative, maintain him being on the back foot rather than just trading everything and it quieting down into a very passive sort of position. So I think on f4, if he were to initiate a trade, I would take back with the f pawn. And I think then, if he were to go on and play f6, then I could even, if I don't want to play knight f3 for fear of bishop g4 pinning the knight, then what I could do is play bishop to f4 at that point in time. Then if he takes, I take, he takes, I take, we may still get a queen trade there. So I'm not so sure about that either. So, of course, another move I could try here is simply to take this pawn. But I'm not too thrilled with that. I think I'm probably better off continuing my development in general terms. I'm going to play f4. I know I said I didn't love the continuation because I think it will probably allow him to trade queens at some point. But I'm also aware that at some point, if I don't want to trade queens, I may be able to move my queen away with check, potentially, or otherwise just moving it away somewhere else. And in the worst case scenario that, we do trade queens and I just end up with a pawn over here, well, I can try and still hold on to this pawn and claim that his development is still hampered. And if he ever wants to move these pawns, I'm probably going to get rid of this weak pawn, as I had made the argument before. But yes, in terms of meta strategy, one of the things I want to do is try and play very solidly, which as you can see is probably not something I'm doing a great job of right here and right now. But I want to play very solidly, and I would like to implement the methodical thinking that has been a feature of the Winning Chess YouTube series that I published. So what's going on here is he's now attacking this pawn twice. I'm only defending it once, but I can defend it for a second time in a couple of different ways, actually. One of those ways is knight f3, but again, he can play bishop g4, thereby pinning my knight, and that makes my knight essentially ineffective as a defender of this pawn. So another method would be bishop e3. And I think that's probably what I'm going to go for. I did want to play or reserve for myself the option of playing bishop f4 in future, but I'm not sure I have that luxury at this point. Another possibility, though, is I could pin his knight, taking it out of commission. Problem is, if we end up trading my bishop for his knight in a very open position where my light squares seem very vulnerable and open, I'm not sure that's really something that I'd love to do. Which actually brings me back to this thought of playing knight f3, encouraging bishop g4, and maybe then playing this bishop move. If he were then to take here, he's ruining my pawn structure, however, which I don't like. So I will actually play this bishop e3 move, sort of by a process of elimination. And we'll see what he does next, and whether at all this pawn is actually going to hamper his development or make it difficult for him to complete his ideal sort of a setup. So that was my initial argument. Whether it's actually going to come to life or not, we're not sure yet. But I think as this position becomes more complex, which it's doing, the time to start thinking more methodically is arriving. So when thinking of the moves I want to play from this point on in particular, I really want to be thinking about the forcing moves, the violent moves, the moves that require the opponent to respond in a particular way, because those are the moves that are going to allow calculation and also are going to allow, therefore, visualization of a winning future. So, in this particular position, it's difficult to say what he's going to do. And we see he's developed his bishop. So now we have something to potentially work with. We can start moving with tempo in this position. Now, one tempo move we could maybe aim at is g4. I would expect their bishop e4 hitting our rook. And it looks as though our rook's basically lost there. We do have, in that position, knight f3. But as I said, I want to play very solidly, and you can see that is anything but solid. My king's very open. The light squares are, in fact, quite weak for me at the moment. Another possibility would be to play this d5 move. However, it just simply drops a pawn, which I don't want to do. Therefore, another possibility would be queen b3, taking aim at the b7 pawn. That, however, does drop this pawn. That does, however, seem to drop this pawn. So I don't think that's really what I want to do either. I think it's important for me to try and castle in this position because I'm still so very open. Therefore, what it might make sense for me to do is develop my knight to what is really the most natural square. Now, if he were to play this bishop g4 move, it means it would have taken him 2 bishop moves to do so. 1 and then 2. So I'm happier playing it now than I was before. The other thing is this pawn is amply defended, and if he were to attack my knight, I could defend it in several ways. All right, so he's putting his rook on an open file. That makes a great deal of sense. Perfectly good move, very legitimate. Does he have any particular threats in this position? I don't think so. I think I want to just continue doing what I'm doing, and that is trying to get myself castled. Now, I guess that shouldn't be the be all and end all of the goals that you're trying to achieve in this given position. But I think it is nevertheless a reasonable one. Something I could do now is also try and trade my bishop for his. If we have that sort of a trade, it's worth noting that his knight could also jump in to b4 at any point in time. In fact, maybe even on this move, he could try and jump into b4 and pave a way for his either rook or knight to land ultimately on c2. If he were to land there immediately, I can play queen a4 check, which also hits the knight and would therefore force that knight to jump back. So it's not currently a threat. It may become a threat, however, in the future. I might want to just play knight c3 for the moment. Knight c3, I think, contains the threat of g4. No, g4 is no longer a threat, given that my knight blocks my queen's defense of g4. Okay, I could also use this knight to go after this bishop. And I could do that immediately. That is an interesting idea, I think. If the bishop moves back, well, then he's taken out one of the attackers of this pawn and relieved some of the pressure on my position. If he comes back here, well, then you can see there's almost a fork happening here. I would just need one more move to help defend that square a little bit better. So it's difficult to say what's best here. There is still this possibility of just pinning this knight as well. Certainly still a possibility. Also, if I play this knight h4, he might just develop his knight this way. And in some ways, might that actually benefit him or help him? Maybe. I can also develop my bishop here, taking aim at this square. The bishop there would be quite vulnerable to attack, but again, any place that this knight wants to jump away, I would like to have a check at my disposal there. Don't really want to allow such tactics. You can see how low I'm running on time already. It's a big problem. I think I've got some decent options, and I'm just going to go with one of them. And that is going to be the move. Again, if I play this knight c3 move and he comes here, yes, I have queen a4. And if he drops back, then I do have this pawn defended amply. So yes, I'm just going to play knight c3. Keeping it simple, keeping it solid. And we'll try and get some time back on the board. I haven't decided where this bishop really belongs yet. Do I want to trade it? Do I want to be more ambitious? Do I want to trade it for his knight? Do I just want to leave it so that it can break any sort of pins along g4 to d1 diagonal? Haven't decided, but this knight basically I think belongs here. It means that my rook can become mobile now. And while I haven't yet castled, I don't think I'm in any desperate need to do so at the moment. Let's wait and see what he does. Let's give him a chance to reveal some of his cards. Now, I didn't see anything particularly forcing there that worked, but I did try to go through some of the more forcing moves. And I think that's good technique or a good practice. Now, coming up next, again, this pawn now, I think, is starting to annoy him, because he probably doesn't really want to develop the knight out to h6, even though it's probably not a bad move. And in hindsight, I wonder if maybe I should have played queen d4 to prevent the knight from coming to h6, which just seems like it needs to be played. And in fact, he plays it. So I can prevent him now from castling by taking aim at this knight. If he castles, I just win the piece. However, if I do play this move, he can jump the knight down here, attacking my bishop. And that would be quite annoying as well. So I'm not sure whether that's really what I want to do. It may be if I started with a move like h4, but still, then he castles. Then if I play queen d2, where does this knight actually go? It wouldn't have any safe squares, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to allow his knight this square. And I know I played that quickly and I didn't necessarily consider a lot of moves, and that's the downside of playing so slowly. Definitely something I'll have to work on if I want to get this rating up to 2000. But I think it's a relatively solid move, and it, I think, contains a trap. That if he just castles, which is probably natural, how does he meet this move, queen d2, attacking the knight that would have no retreating square? I guess we'll find out. So if he can't castle now, then perhaps queen d2 will still work on the next move. Also, with my knight now on c3, where it provides some force against the d5 square, maybe I can in fact follow up with g4, hitting the bishop and seeing whether he'll step into this fork. And if he doesn't step into the fork, whether we're starting to push him back. In such a position, my only sort of misgiving is how open my whole position is. I'm vulnerable when you're open. When you're open, you're vulnerable. He castles. I'm going to play queen d2, and let's see if he's cooked up some particular special defense. But what's he doing with this knight now that I've got two pieces attacking it, and it has nowhere to run that's actually safe? I suppose he can try potentially for some sort of a counter-attack against one of my pieces, but I don't see any possibility of that happening at the moment. Maybe this idea of knight b4 seeking to get some sort of a fork in here may be what he's thinking of. But I think I can just guard that forking square, and the predicament of this knight remains on the board. So I'm not too sure what he wants to do here, or what he should do here, I should say. If knight b4, I think that may well be the best move, because it does force me to consider what I want to do here. If I play rook c1 and he gives a check, I can take, and once he takes here, I can take here. Then for the rook, I've got a knight and another knight. Then, let's say he takes this bishop. I suppose I can choose which bishop I want to take. I would probably take this bishop as well. He's going for this line. So is there any other sort of better move that I can come up with here? Maybe another way to defend this square? Or some other sort of an indirect defense? I mean, maybe even castling, but that seems very, very reckless. Perhaps I could just take the knight immediately, allow him the check, move my king, let him take the rook, take his bishop, which he'll probably take back. Then I can move my bishop away and probably win his knight. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say go for it. Now, could be right, could be wrong. We shall see. I think he's going to land this check now. Another sort of idea coming to mind, of course, now is the idea of knight g5 threatening checkmate. Problem with it, if I put my king on f2, is that the moment the knight moves away, his queen can come down with check. So that's something to be aware of. So I suspect, surely he's going to play this checking move here. And I think I'll play this. Maybe then he takes this pawn. Maybe that's his idea. But keep in mind, I just want a knight. So if he only gets a pawn back for it, probably he'll end up getting 2 pawns at least. My king is very open. The position is very dangerous for me if I'm not very careful, and possibly even if I am careful. I think what I really want to do is actually bring my queen back if I have a chance and just consolidate an advantage. I don't think I can really prosecute some kind of checkmating attack. I've only got my queen up there, and throwing my knight away from my own king, I think, is basically too much to aim for. Therefore, if given an opportunity, I'll be happy to trade knights if he wants to. But I think as a priority, I'm essentially just going to bring my queen back home. Bring my queen back and aim to consolidate. And if he takes the rook here, well, then I think I simply try to continue my development. Okay. And there's going to be ways that I can aim to do this. One of them could be g4. Crazy as that may seem, g4. If he wants to stay on the diagonal, it would have to be here that he comes to. All right, now we're going to have to do a little bit of thinking. Now, I guess another one of my central ideas here was, like I say, just to consolidate. I don't think I should go for this kind of checkmating attack. I don't think it's going to work. He's actually up material at the moment, but my basic idea is that I think I can capture this knight. So if I just come back, maybe I can't. So if his knight comes here, maybe I cannot capture the knight. We shall see. But if he does just come back there, then this idea of g4, where does the bishop go? Can't come really anywhere. But at the same time, if it goes away, it looks like I'm going to capture something. So, I mean, if I play something like this, then yes, I'm directly attacking the knight twice. The problem is the knight jumps up here, captures this, and then let's say I take this, he takes this. That's just no good. So I think I'm essentially forced here to try g4. My knight and my queen defend the pawn from his knight and his queen. My queen attacks his knight. His bishop, which defends the knight, is attacked by my pawn. And the only other squares it can remain on to defend the knight are forcefully defended by my pieces. So perhaps he gives up the bishop for a pawn. He sacrifices the rook. Sacrifices the rook here. And the question is why? And the reason is because after I take back, he wants the bishop to come here. Now, in that case, material is equal. In that case, material is equal. Whereas if I just take this bishop, then I'm also attacking both of these things. He's going to move this back away. And then I could try and open up play, but it's actually going to open up my king more than his. So I will actually take the rook. That at least solidifies this position a little bit more. And we can play on from here. What do we want to do now? Now we're running very low on time. That's one unfortunate factor in this position. I'm going to do this so that I break the pin against my knight. My knight was pinned because my rook could fall behind it. That's no longer the case. I can now move my rook. His knight is still in something of a precarious position. He can evacuate it through a3. But I could play something. Okay, so he's putting more pressure there, but probably not enough pressure. I'm running very low on time, however. Let's attack his knight. Let's attack the knight. Another idea, if he moves the knight away, would be a move like this to see if we can get some more trades happening. Because I think in the end game I'm doing well with the amount of activity that my pawns have. So let's try this. Let's try this. Now we've got the bishops off the board. He's attacking my queen. I can attack his as well, if I would like. I can also just move out of the way for now. Now I can force more trades. Have to be very, very careful here because he's going to open up this file and with it his rook. Oh no, this could be very bad. This could be very bad, I'm afraid. I'm at least down a pawn here, which is regrettable. We'll take back like this. This pawn may fall, but that might just be the way the cookie crumbles. So essentially we're down a pawn. I can grab this pawn in that case. But then he would have this check, which would win my rook. No, he wouldn't, because I would be defending that square. So I think if he... Okay, so he defends there instead. I can give this check. Well, actually, I'm checked myself here. I'm checked myself here. I'm going to offer the queen trade now because I'm so low on time, I can't really think of anything else. But going into a rook endgame where my king is already cut off, I don't really like the look of very much. I'm down a pawn as well, which obviously doesn't help. But who knows? With my king being more active than his, it's possible that I can still win this. When it comes to these sorts of endgames, it is very important to try to keep the opposition when that is applicable. Now what I'm going to... Oh no. Now I've allowed this check that I pointed out earlier. So it is essentially all over at this point, unfortunately. He's going to take my rook. And it's just going to be lights out. Unfortunately, that is the case. I don't think I have any perpetual checks, or do I? Or do I? I doubt it. But I might. His position is relatively open. And my queen may have the ability to just check infinitely, given that his... Oh, maybe not. He does control this square. And therefore, I'm probably just going to lose this. It hurts to lose, but it's something that you need to learn to do. Super far away from a 2000 rating. That was clearly a very poorly played game, but we'll analyze it at the end. Let's wait until the end. If he moves here, then I will play this check, because then I have access to a back rank check if I want to try and go for some sort of a perpetual. Therefore, I think it's probably better for him, or maybe either to even play this move, because then after check, can he come here? Well, definitely not, because then I can actually almost checkmate him, but force him to give up his queen. So he goes there. I'm going to give this check. And then if he comes back here, I might give the check from here, specifically so that if he blocks with this, I can actually provide another check. So he does it that way. Well, I have to give this check. Maybe I actually would have been better off there doing something a little bit different. But of course I didn't do something a little bit different. So I'll come back. Pinning this. Still, this is a possibility. Probably should have thought about it earlier. But I didn't. Now, he can provide this check up here if he wants, and I'll simply have to drop myself back. But in the current position, this is a very precariously placed piece. It's just that I can't really make any big advantage out of that. Maybe here I had a chance. The problem with that is, even then, he would have check. And I I would be forced to take. And once he takes back, it's just resign. It should really be resign already, but I'm just playing on to see if I can somehow swindle a draw out of this scenario. I guess I'm threatening to take this pawn with a check and try to continue just checking him, but as long as he has this move, which I don't really need to calculate my response because it's forced for all intents and purposes, King G3, there he can actually play Queen F4 check, which is probably what he wants to do. No, he can't do that because I simply just take. So what does he do here? He doesn't have another check available at the moment, but I am about to fork these two pieces, interestingly enough. So what does happen here? I'm not so sure. As you can see, play at a 1700 rated level is pretty crap. Pretty absolutely crap, if we're being honest about it. Now, I'm just going to take the pawn here because it comes with check. I know he can... Okay, and now we can give more checks. I'm going to do it this way so that we can come back and give this check as well. And if he then moves out of the way, I suppose I just try and pin the knight, pin the rook again. Whereas if he comes here, well, I probably take this pawn then. Possibly this pawn, but probably this pawn. So I'm sure he's winning. But I'm trying to make it difficult and I'm trying to hang on. So here I can take the pawn. It doesn't come with check, and it means that he can check me. And after I then move away, he can force a queen trade and I will lose. So I really can't allow that. And for that reason, essentially alone, I'm actually just going to pin this rook. Because as long as he's immobile, it's very difficult for him to force a queen trade here. And as long as he can't force a queen trade... Oh, there's the queen trade. Unfortunately, that will do it. Well, I have to play on. I have to try. So he's going to take, I'm going to take back. I'm going to attack the knight, the rook. The rook's going to move. And we'll see what happens after that. But I apologize. This is not representative of how I can usually play. So he takes. Can I take? Well, I don't see why not. Can't be any worse. It's a thoroughly lost position regardless. So we take back. Unfortunately, that pawn's a goner. Don't know what he's thinking of here. There's no chance he can lose. The very worst that can happen to him is he somehow allows a draw, but it would be very difficult for him to allow a draw from this position. He can even give me his rook and still win, which of course he won't do. Can I play for a stalemate somehow? More than likely no, but I have to try, so I'll give away my last remaining pawn and see what we can come up with. I'm still within the square of this pawn. I'm not, of course, going to be able to actually stop its advance. And that will do it. I'll let him checkmate me. He's going to get another queen. No, he's not. He's going to just go for the mate Shocker. An absolute shocker of a game and a well-deserved loss. Let's take it back to the start and I'll see what I think about it, because you have to analyze things. Now, this move g6 is not one I've ever sort of come across before, but I think my response of d4 is only natural. And after he takes and I take back, I think that's natural. Here, e5 probably didn't make as much sense. If I could go back in time, I'd probably play knight f3, maybe even f3, but probably knight f3 or knight c3, maybe bishop e3, but probably just knight f3 would have been a lot better. This e5 idea, not so great. Gives black a tiny little edge. And I think the problem was that I didn't stick to my basic plan of playing very solid. Instead of playing solid, I played very open, and I opened myself up with moves like f4. He's got a slightly bigger advantage now. Now, after the trades, where's my king ever going to be safe? It's a slight problem. Here I'm somewhat forced, I'm on the back foot because I'm somewhat forced to defend this pawn. I'm in a passive position. Perhaps there was a better way to do it. His advantage grows. And now I just tried to develop, and things are objectively okay. I mean, it's a draw, objectively speaking. Here, I played this move h3, and that was not a bad move. Contained a nice idea. After he castled, I played queen d2, going after this knight. Here I felt the position was actually in my favor, and the computer definitely agrees. And as I was commenting at the time, I thought that this was going quite okay for me, because this highlighted knight experiences a lot of difficulty. So what went wrong? I did see that he would have this knight b4 move, and my initial inclination was to just play rook c1, which in hindsight I probably should have. What did I do instead though? I went for this capture, which resulted in my queen sort of getting into no man's land. Now, yes, I'm still a little bit better, but I would bet that rook c1 maintains more of an advantage. Rook c1 here, in fact, seems to be the correct move, keeping the advantage in my half. If he goes for this, then I would think I'd take. And only after he takes back do I then capture, which is the variation that I verbalized during the game itself. Why I didn't go for this, I don't know. I then said if he took the bishop, I would probably go for his dark squared bishop rather than the light squared bishop. And that also seems to be in line with the best variation here. So why did I not go for that? I thought I saw something better. I thought I saw just taking, allowing him in here and then moving my king away. In hindsight, obviously, it's easy to see that I was wrong. But nevertheless, I still had an advantageous position here of about 0.7. After he took back and I took the bishop, he lands his check, and nevertheless, the advantage remains mine. I move out of the way. Completely fine. He takes the rook, understandably. Now, here, was there a way for me to try and basically to win this knight? I'm not sure. I mean, it still says I have an advantage here. So I assume there must be. Bringing the queen back, however, was not the right answer. This eliminates any advantage that I had. I thought it would consolidate my advantage, but actually it did away with my advantage. Now, let's try and think of what would be a better move in this position. If it's not to bring the queen back, I mean, I didn't like the idea of going for checkmate because he could, I'll make these moves on the board, because he would have check. And my king's just being chased here. I don't like this much at all. If I move here, he's just going to take another pawn. and I just have to move back anyway. I can't stay on this diagonal. So this just isn't nice. I didn't want to allow that. Of course, if he went wrong, like if he played something even like this, trying to kick my knight, then yes, it's checkmate. But he's not going to do that. He's going to go for this pawn with checks. So that's why I didn't want to go for like something like this. What else I may have been able to do? Well, I may have been able to just play a simple move like bishop e2, but still looks like he's going to evacuate this knight before very long. Could I have played anything with tempo? Maybe g4 right here. Then if he wants to keep, let's make the moves on the board. If he moves the bishop back, then I can play my own bishop out, and yes, I'm going to win this knight, and the advantage is in fact mine, so that's nice. So g4 seems like it probably is the right move, because the only other thing he could do maybe is something like this, but then he's taken away the square from his knight anyway, and after we just play a simple move like this, where's the knight go? The best he can do is give it up for a pawn, and here we are just up too much material. Now I would think a simple move like this to consolidate the advantage would actually be completely fine, even without thinking about it, and yes, it does retain a small advantage. Although here it's indicating that there's actually a forced mate sequence, which would be much better. I would imagine it starts like this. No. All right. In any case, g4 seems to have been a much better move there. If he had gone for his same idea that he did in the game of sacking the rook for the knight, well, then I can take his rook. The bishop still is under attack, so if he wants to stay on the same diagonal, that's fine. The issue now being, I can bring my queen back. No, that's not the issue. I can attack his rook. You know, I'm just not really seeing it. Where is this mate threat that can... Oh, well, now the mate threat is very real, now that this pawn is actually defended. Now this just threatens mate, and also threatens this, so... Fair enough that after g4, this move simply doesn't work because it frees my knight to participate in a mating attack. So I think g4 was the better move, but instead I retreated the queen, and again, it's not the end of the world. He's got a slight advantage. That's nothing at this level. In fact, it's all zeros. After he tries and evacuates his knight, I played g4. It's all still zeros according to the computer. And he sacrifices the exchange, which was a lovely move, and maintains all zeros on the computer. Now at this point I think I played bishop g2, very much in time pressure, 35 seconds on the clock. Probably that was a mistake. But only a very, very minor one. No, it's still all zeros. It's still all zeros. He brings his queen in, and again under very heavy time pressure I just played rook to c1, trying to basically now stay solid. He gets rid of his knight out of danger, and I try and go for some trades. Possibly not so good. Gives him a small advantage, and after we trade, he attacks my queen. My first instinct really here was actually to play knight f4, attacking his queen. And that would have been a very bad idea, according to the computer. Why is that? I don't know. Is it that he takes my queen? No, it's not. Why is it such a bad idea? I just don't know. Is it that he just infiltrates a little bit more into my position? And my queen still has to move? It's funny that I didn't really properly identify this as such a big problem for me. Because it looks like I'm forcing a trade here. And if we get a trade, I'm fine. If we don't get a trade, does he have to move his knight away? No, because we're fine there. So what am I missing? Oh, I guess I'm missing this. In any case, at this point the position is still not too bad. He's got an advantage, but it's not game winning by any stretch. In fact, it's marginal, almost negligible. Maybe I should have done something differently here. One of my first thoughts was to play knight e3. That was before I realized that this was going to come with tempo, so that's why I didn't want to play knight e3. Maybe I should have played this to keep the position closed. But that seems to allow his knight to reroute this way, which may not be very good for me. It may have also been better for me just to come back with my king rather than moving up into his territory, but even there it's not very clear that that's better. So what was I supposed to do? I could take the pawn, but I imagine he's going to take back with the rook. And I didn't really like this idea at all. So what am I missing here? Why was this king g3 move considered so bad? Was it just because he opens up the position, winning a pawn? I mean, I suppose so. Perhaps I should have defended the pawn again. But no, that isn't right. Very difficult. In any case, he opened the position, and I then allowed this trade. And all of a sudden I was in a losing position. Actually, this is a losing position, but this is really not. This is just a position where he has a bit of an edge again. Maybe here I should have just dropped my king back. Instead, I went for this, offered the queen trade, and now that would be disastrous. And the reason it's disastrous is because, of course, I lost my rook. Was there ever a time where I actually had any kind of perpetual? Of course, I don't think so. And that's really all we need to look at. So let's have a look at the computer analysis of this game. Basically to summarize everything we've already spoken about and seen. These are all book moves. E5 really probably wasn't. You know, it was a bit of a mistake. If I were to do it again, I think I would probably just go knight f3. Keep it simple. And that would have been fine. Excuse me. Excuse me. Bishop e3 was also a mistake, so what else could I have done here? Perhaps this knight f3 move again was best, and after bishop g4, then in fact bishop b5. Now that's a nice idea, saying, look, we both trade our bishops, rather than just me giving my bishop for your knight. So that's a nice idea. Excuse me. Excuse me. This is why I'm not at work today. All right. Now, what else happened in the game? I mean, yes, e5 was over-ambitious and a mistake. Other than that, rook c1 would have been better than taking there on h6. Rook c1 would really probably have just meant I'm going to win this game. His best possible move, according to the computer, is to check. And then just to show the line, I would have been the one to give up the exchange. But as a consequence of giving up an exchange, I would have won a full piece. And in the resulting position, I would simply be in a very, very solidly advantageous position. So it's a shame that I didn't play this way, but there you have it. In any case, after I made the mistake of taking here, I still had a better position and only really blew it here with the sort of unconscious move of bringing the queen back to consolidate an advantage. Would have been better off thinking about g4. I think I did actually consider this in the game, but I thought that it made me too open. In hindsight, it was the way to try and snag this knight and ultimately just have too much material for him to come back from. So after bringing the queen back, it's not like I was lost. g4 was still good. He played a beautiful sacrifice. But ultimately, I think I ran out of time. And because I didn't have time, I couldn't think. And because I couldn't think, I ended up making a couple of big blunders and mistakes, which just meant that the position fell apart. So time pressure, probably more than anything else, is that I had spent a lot of time considering positions that were actually probably inconsequential in practical senses. You know, whether I played e5 or whether I played knight f3 at the beginning, probably nowhere near as important. You know, in this position, it wasn't worth spending so many minutes on e5 as compared to knight f3 or as compared to bishop e3. Any of these moves would have been better if played within 10 or 15 seconds as compared to how long it actually took me to play the move, which I think was in, 5 minutes or so. So in any case, that does it for this game. The first training game is a loss. We'll do one more this week. Tomorrow we'll come back and do some tactics training, of which there will be 2 this week. The other thing we'll do at some point in this week is a analysis of a master level game. Thank you for watching.